Hi, and welcome to the Conscious Marketer podcast. This is Richard. I'm also joined by my co-host, Kylie. Hi, Kylie.
Hey there.
And today we have an episode and we're going to be introducing you to Bree Kuryk. Hi, Bree. How are you doing today?
Hello. I'm so excited to be here. I'm wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, we love to bring on co-creators, other marketing agencies, other people that are coaches and consultants. And Bree is the creator of a company called Radiant on Purpose, and she kind of combines marketing consulting with the use of human design and gene keys. So that's super exciting. Bree, maybe you can start by just sharing a little bit about how you came into, what you're doing now and a little bit of your backstory so people know more about you.
Yeah. Where do I even start? Well, the easiest thing to say or start with is that in terms of my business and what I do, I started with a very traditional marketing background where I was, right out of college, I went straight into marketing. And to me, what drew me to marketing was that I actually got into event planning first. And so I loved that marketing was fun and that I got to travel the world for a little bit. And that's basically what drew me to it. And my career progressed as, pretty normally, I would say. And then I just hit a point where I actually had, at one point early in my 20s, had put on my vision board, there was a certain marketing agency that I wanted to work for in a certain role. And I gradually worked myself there. I started in corporate marketing. I went over to the agency, eventually made the jump to agency marketing, working for very big businesses with very big ad spends. And eventually ended up manifesting or finding myself in this exact company, this exact role that I had put on my vision board years earlier. But what I realized very quickly is that job was not for me for many reasons. And not only was it just not the type of marketing I like to do, the clients I was working for were things I just really didn't feel aligned with. My biggest clients were big banks and two big oil companies. And so that was one thing. Also, my career progressed where I got further and further kind of in the tech and the analytics side of things, just because the bigger agency you work with, they want you to pigeonhole yourself more and more as you continue to grow. So I just found myself in a situation where I just really had kind of a crisis of conscience. And that led me on a spiritual journey where I discovered all sorts of fun modalities and, just started, doing simple things such as journaling or really starting to look inward and figure out what I really wanted. And that is where I found human design. Of all the modalities I was looking into, it was the one that resonated with me the most right away. And and for many years, I kind of just was studying human design, was living human design in my personal life. And I was continuing to work on this, doing the external marketing and business consulting that I was doing. And eventually realized that these things actually work together, especially, for entrepreneurs where you are the main energy of your business, whether you have a team or not, and how these things can work together to help you create the business that you want, around with internally and as well as how you market it externally. And so that leads me to where I'm here today in short.
I'm super curious about how the skill set that you built in corporate is translated into the work that you do today. Because I know for me, sometimes I've been called the Robin Hood of marketing at times because I study with people who are very successful, who I don't necessarily believe in. And then I translate the really awesome, good, smart, intelligent parts of what they're doing into a more spiritual lens. So do you find yourself doing that type of work as well?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the most rewarding things to me and why I've found this path and why I've stuck to it is that marketing, when you learn, the marketing that I learned on the corporate side of things was always very complex. It was always just, it's very data driven. And of course I was in analytics, so it was extremely, extremely data driven, and it's just very objective. And the people that I work with most, they don't need all the complexity. They don't necessarily need everything to be decided through a number. And so it's the biggest reward or the biggest thing is having that big foundation and understanding conceptually, what is marketing? What does marketing do? And making it much more simple and much more tangible to people who don't necessarily have that experience. Because I think in corporate things, it's easy for things to get really complicated really quickly. And people are always just, throwing out all those, crazy terminology and just trying to confuse people to show that they know a lot. But to me, being able to translate this into what I do now is how can I simplify it? How can I even, a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners that don't have that marketing experience, it's like, they think marketing is like posting on Instagram, in a silo, or finding a channel in a silo. And so to me, being able to see the bigger picture, but make it simple and doable for other people is really, I think, where you almost have to have that big body of knowledge sometimes to be able to translate it in a simple way. So I find it, even though that was a path that ultimately wasn't right for me, that the knowledge and the experience there has been completely invaluable. And the fun part is being able to translate it in a way that doesn't make, people go cross-eyed, like entrepreneurs go cross-eyed when they're trying to figure out what marketing means for them or their business.
I'm kind of curious because you work with a lot of clients, as do we. I'm kind of curious, what are some of the things that people come to you and they just aren't seeing, like how to show up online correctly? What are some of the myths or beliefs that they have, and you have to kind of share a different perspective,
Yeah, I think there's two things that come to mind. The first thing being that, a lot of my clients are, I have clients at all different stages, but ones that are closer to the beginner or middle stage, they see what other successful people are doing in their industry and their niche, and they feel like they have to copy paste. It's like copy. Well, it's working for them, so it works for me. And the funny thing about marketing, or maybe the counterintuitive thing, is that the way to actually get seen and be heard is to stand out and be different. So sometimes you almost have to go against your, go what you think is what you're supposed to do, and, find ways to differentiate yourself. Like that's a very traditional marketing thing. Like, how are you different than the people in your niche, and how do you communicate that in a way that your audience understands? And I think there's a lot in the online world where there's a lot of, depending on what industry you're in, especially, but there's a lot of things that kind of look the same, and it's hard to tell what that difference is. But I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is that having a certain, how do I try to say this? Like, I think a lot of the clients I work with, they think they have to be present in all places. So they think they have to be on TikTok. They think they have to be on Instagram. And at least one, if not multiple of those channels fit them well. And one, if not multiple of those channels are like their worst nightmare. So they have to drag themselves to put themselves, record a TikTok video. And so that's usually one of the first things that I bust, myths that I bust with them, is you don't have to be everywhere. And I recommend, especially if it's a smaller business with either no team, like a solopreneur or someone with a small team, is pick what you want to be and be great there. Or maybe pick a couple channels to be really great at and just forget the rest until either you have the team to support it, or maybe you just never go there. You just can brush it off and do what you do best in the places that you do it best from a marketing perspective.
I really love both of those. And we see a lot of that there, but it is kind of funny that really one of the great secrets to marketing on the first point you made is to position yourself so that you are different and seen as unique. And so it's funny how we look at other people and we're like, okay, I've got to copy this person's video style or this, or I think there's a higher level myth there where they're copying somebody who's been doing it for 10 years, and they have all this background and they're trying to emulate something that isn't even who they are. So just having that person be themselves rather than try to copy, it is a little counterintuitive though, because we always want to look at what other people are doing and go, I need to do that too, or I want to do that website or whatever it is.
I know. And here's the thing, I think having inspiration is a good thing, especially if you're someone that's just starting out and you don't really understand marketing, and seeing how the puzzle pieces, for example, for a sales page or something come together, what is the structure? I think that's all fine. But in the end, when it comes to actually writing the copy, I recommend to all of my clients is to just put their blinders on and just write, knowing kind of the sections or the chunks of what you're trying to convey or, to the person reading it, you need to write in your own language ultimately.
Yeah,
Speaking,
to your,
go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, and speaking to your second point, just I think you're right on it. Most people are really successful on one channel, and the medium is really different. But also, I think the interesting thing about that is each channel really has quite a different avatar base. So your clients on TikTok aren't your clients on Facebook or YouTube. Totally. They all have different profiles, and they need and want different things. And so often, like, your clients kind of will conjugate's kind of an interesting word, conjugate in like one channel. And so you kind of need to figure out which channel they're at. And then as you grow, then you can kind of expand off that base audience. So those are really great points.
Mm-hmm.
I'm super curious. We're talking about differentiation. That's a thing that we have to talk about with people all the time, whether they're beginner or more advanced. It's just something that we always have to work on implementing more and more, especially as more and more people come online. And I don't like the word competition, but there's just more people who do what we do. So I have never heard anyone say that they're using human design and Gene Keys to do that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to differentiating yourself, if you don't have, I think there's multiple paths you take to understand truly how you differentiate yourself. One path is what many traditional marketers know is like doing, competitive research or market research and kind of seeing what's out there and finding the gap. And that's one thing. And yes, of course, we could do that all day long, but what with a lot of the clients that I work with, they are coming into a market where there is already, people out there. Like, there's not very many like wide, what is it called? Like blue ocean space necessarily for, I mean, there is, but I think so. One of the things, the way that I use human design and Gene Keys is to help them tease out the things about themselves that make them different, because a lot of the clients that I work with are spiritual in some way. A lot of them have some sort of like energy or healing modality to the work that they do. And so it helped, that is very important that they understand what, it's like sometimes they can't see in their self what makes them different. So that is where I use human design Gene Keys, where we pull up their chart and we talk about, okay, what are the, what are you designed to do? How are you designed to deliver what you're doing? There's a lot of clues in your chart, both human design and Gene Keys, that can tell you, how it's best for you to deliver your work into the world. It also tells you like, what are your strengths and what are the things that you can speak to, or how can you speak? I shouldn't say, it doesn't get into specifics like saying, oh, you should be an astrologist or something like that, but it does give you clues as to what your actual gifts are and things like that. And it helps you kind of tease out those bits of copy or the ways that you can differentiate yourself just by understanding your energy a little bit better. So when I work with clients, we pull up these charts and I walk them through, what are some of the big, energies that you have in your chart? What is your, how are you meant to deliver and, your work? Some people are meant to deliver it in more like simple, like solution-based things. Some people are meant to build through networking and relationships and community. And there's all these different things that we kind of go to help them figure out, well, this is what makes me unique and this is what makes me different. And then we work on how to infuse that into their copy, into their offers, into, how they connect with their audiences as well.
Do you also use it in terms of like how they should work? Because I don't know a lot of human design, but I was told one time that my human design shouldn't really work that much. And I was like, oh, that's not going to work for me. But do you support them in that way as well?
Yes. Yeah. So that is usually something that, yeah, I mean, I do definitely. I think it's most of the people who come to me are coming from a marketing perspective, just because that's what I know best. But at the same time, I'm also very much an operations person. That's actually my sweet, from corporate, I was more of marketing and operations together. So that's really, really like what my sweet spot is. And I think translating that and using your energy to translate that into like, okay, if you aren't meant to, first of all, let me just say for human design, I don't really believe in the blanket statements like, oh, you're this type. That means you should only work 2 to 3 hours a day. I'm guessing you're either a projector or a reflector, perhaps. I don't know if that resonates with you at all, but there's a lot of stuff out there online that's like, okay, if you're this type, that means you're only supposed to work 2 to 3 hours a day, or like there's very generalized blanket type statements. And I don't believe in a lot of that. I think human design is truly a tool to help you understand yourself better. There's not necessarily rules. So part of my process absolutely is to help, this is where I think the coaching comes in more than the consulting in terms of the work. Like when I work with clients is like asking them questions to dig into, well, maybe, are you working too much? Are you not working enough? Your human design says, maybe this is what you should be doing, but it's not necessarily a rule. I know people who are projectors who are only supposed to be working 2 to 3 hours a day, who they happen to have 3 out of 4 energy centers defined. So I don't know if we want to go into details there, but it's like even though they're a projector, they actually are designed to have a lot of energy and to be able to work longer hours than sometimes some of the types that are supposed to be, like, quote unquote, supposed to be working more during the day. So it is something we work with. It's a little bit more of coaching. Like, yes, there's things we can talk about where there's maybe quick fixes, like, hey, maybe consider working in this type of environment. There's a lot that can be learned about, like what type of environment is right for you. Like, how should you set up, your workspace, like little things like that can be quick fixes. But a lot of the work too is just is kind of coaching and iterating and like asking yourself the right questions and tuning into what your intuition, your human design, like signature, not self, your authority, all of those things are telling you, and iterating in terms of what your work day or work structure or team or business is like as well. Because it's ultimately, human design is about, it's an experiment. It's the science of differentiation. So it's it's called a science. It's about experimentation. So that is truly what I preach and what I practice myself in terms of what I preach. Is it truly is an experiment where every day you kind of just check in and find ways to do things better that are more aligned with your energy and things like that as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think this, the idea of time management based on your personality type is kind of interesting to me, because I think that a lot of entrepreneurs or creators, they feel such a time pressure and they feel like they don't have enough time. But I think there's an underlying issue that like people like you can really help them to figure out not only what their style is, but also like maybe what's a good use of their time. I'm kind of curious, if you were working with somebody, like how do you kind of guide them so that the work that they do is really productive and can make an impact in the world? Because my sense is a lot of people do a lot of things online, but probably it's more like the 95% rule, not even 80-20, where like 5% of their work actually creates some kind of impact or influence on, their business and life.
Yeah, I think, this isn't necessarily even related to human design, but like I described a little bit earlier, is I think, just 95% of the clients that I work with try to make things too complicated, or they allow things to get too complicated. And therefore that's why they're overworking themselves. They're feeling like they're going towards burnout. And so a lot of the work that I do, honestly, is kind of pulling them back and helping them realize like what is truly important. It's as simple, like thinking they need a complicated funnel when it's like, really, you don't necessarily need this complicated funnel. Yes, you do need something that's like a landing page. You do need some way to capture someone's information, like their name and their email address, but it doesn't have to look like this fancy thing over here, this fancy funnel. And it's like, wait, this is all you really need. And just helping them kind of streamline and simplify. And I think that's regardless of human design. That's the biggest mistake I see with, like I said, about 95% of my clients is they just are overwhelmed, or they, are on the verge of burnout because they're just trying to do everything and be all the places, and they don't necessarily have to be in order to be successful. I think, of course, you can layer in all sorts of nuance onto that with the design. I mean, it's because human design is so personalized. It's funny, for the sake of this conversation, I'm struggling to come up with, like, without getting into the specifics of things, but there's all sorts of things that you can learn from someone's chart. Like, a lot of the things that are traditional marketing tasks or marketing responsibilities, such as planning, annual planning, quarterly planning, a lot of those, like, some people are better designed to do that. And some people are better designed to actually be a little bit more free form and free flowing in terms of how they do their marketing. And so I think when I work with people, it's about letting them know that. And honestly, a lot of most people already know that about themselves, but they're trying to force themselves into doing something that they're not necessarily designed to do. And it's like the most common feedback I get is like, oh, you just gave me some validation, or you just gave me some relief. You just like, I already knew that. It just is really nice to hear that that's, what is showing up in my human design. So a lot of it's just helping give clients permission to, like I said earlier, like do things more simply, and to do things in the way that actually flow better for them. Because a lot of people stagnate themselves because they're trying to, like, using that quarterly planning example, like a lot of people find that extremely overwhelming, and they don't really do well with that level of structure. I myself am someone who loves the structure and loves the planning. So it's like, I resonate with that, but there's some people who that's such a big hill for them or mountain to climb that they just don't, and they just avoid it. And it one leaves them feeling like frustrated with their business, but it also stops them from making any forward progress at all. So a lot of the work that I do is helping them, see themselves a little bit more clearly, or understand some of those ways that they work better, but then also helping them like see past some of the roadblocks in a way so that they can just keep making forward progress, even, just little steps at a time. Because, if you're not, no matter what you're doing or where you are, you need to make, my biggest thing is making consistent forward steps every day. And so even if they're small steps, even if you're, a mom and you have young kids, like, what are you doing to take those small steps? And helping, what I love to do is helping remove some of those big roadblocks, like by helping people see themselves better and understand themselves better, so they can continue to make those small, consistent steps forward, instead of being overwhelmed and shut down by some of those things that don't really jive with the way that they work best.
I would love to hear a success story of how this has worked in someone's life that you've worked, or you don't have to obviously share personal information, but just kind of the arc of where they were at to using these tools to where they're at now.
Yeah, I actually have a client who, she very much at the pretty beginning stages of her business. She is a stay-at-home mom of a young toddler. And she was someone very much who, when we started working together, very much at the beginning of her journey, but was just didn't know where to start, didn't know what to do, like didn't have too much of a marketing background. So for me, a lot of the work I was doing was very basic, like, what is marketing? Why do you want to be doing marketing? But the other thing too, is that she felt, I think she got caught up in the, like, you need to be putting out all this content, you need to be on all these channels. And she's like, well, I have a young toddler and I'm a stay-at-home mom. Like, how do I do all of that? And so when we looked at her chart, first things first, so she is designed to be a little bit more in the flow of things. So not necessarily like having a plan. She's also designed not to be consistent necessarily. So she has an undefined ego center or will center. So that means you're not necessarily designed to be consistent with things, or have that, like, things like a weekly post or weekly podcast are not necessarily for her. Yes, a podcast could be good, but it doesn't have to be weekly. And so just kind of deconstructing that for her. The other thing is that she struggled with the ebbs and flows of creativity. So she, some days was feeling like she could just jam out a bunch of content. And some days, like, or for a week at a time, she would feel in a creative lull and would feel really guilty about that, honestly. Like, she would be like, well, why can't I just sit down every day and like write an Instagram post or like do this? And she was feeling really guilty. So we deconstructed a lot of that in her chart through that undefined will center, through just the way that, so her variables, her arrows were that she's showed that she needs to be a little bit more free flowing in terms of how she does things. And so we created a loose idea of the best way for her to create, as well as making her feel better about what she's doing when she's creating. So it's kind of interesting. She, when I first started working with her, she was very set on a certain type of offer that what she was told she should do. She's more in the life coaching side of things. And so she was very set on this like type of life coaching package that she wanted to do. And over the time of us working together and kind of, working in her chart and helping her just recognize herself a little bit better, she actually, I wouldn't say threw that to the side, but decided to, what really came through and was really inspiring to her and where her creativity started to flow, she actually totally changed her offering. She really narrowed down who she was working with, because her life coaching offer, she was really trying to be broad. And when we looked at some of the primary energies in her chart, it was very clear like who she could be helping. So we really narrowed down her niche a lot. We deconstructed her offers. She went from like something that was a longer term offer to things that were more short-term offers. And she did that, like, built that all from being, like I said, a stay-at-home mom with a very young toddler. So, and it was something that took place over the course of months because she didn't have tons of time to devote to her business every day. But it's funny to look back now because I'm like, her business is night and day different, and she feels a lot more seen, a lot more recognized. She's getting a lot more engagement from her audience because she really, went from that broad long-term thing to something more succinct and more like speaking to who she not just like was, not just a smaller audience, but people she was a lot more passionate. So of course, like if you're super, the passion that you feel towards your audience and what you do comes through in your marketing. So of course, when she started doing that, she started getting a lot more engagement on her content as well.
I really love how you just are aligning people with their natural gifts, and then they still have to do the work. It doesn't like happen like magically, but they have to, they have to step into who they are. And I think it's interesting because we've been talking a lot about how, marketing can just, you can just be the teacher, you can step in front of the brand that way, but also that as you really good marketing, it becomes a spiritual path because you're in front of the camera and you're serving your audience and you're connecting with your greater gifts and you're overcoming your fears. And these are all the things that you do when you're like on the personal development, spiritual path. I'm kind of just interested, and I think I would be remiss if I didn't ask this. I mean, you made the shift from corporate into kind of, I don't know, like I would call it like soul-based, marketing or authentic marketing. Which we need so much more of that in the world. Are your clients also doing a lot of that shifting where they're having to kind of shift from like one paradigm to another paradigm? And I'm just kind of wondering what your perspective on that is right now.
Yeah, I think it's almost like to think of just my clients is also to think of the greater like in world as a whole. And I think there's so much more shift, like you can't not see, sorry to use a double negative, but like the winds of change are happening with marketing in general. I think a lot of the clients I work with, like I said, most of them aren't necessarily marketers initially, but they have worked in corporate and they have worked in business and in some way, shape, or form. And so a lot of it is, like I said, almost deconditioning some of those harder like corporate rules, like rules of engagement or things like that too. So I think, like you said, there's really a sweet spot in the middle, because I think there's people that understand that corporate world really well, because a lot of us have been in it at some point or might still be in it. And I think there's a lot of, a growing population of people who are awakening spiritually. They're awakening to spiritual gifts. And so what I love about what your podcast does and like the space that we're both kind of in is we're kind of in this middle of, okay, where can we meet in the middle to make sure these people who have this spiritual calling and the spiritual journey can actually get their message out there. So it's really interesting because I think while the tides are shifting so that less people are doing the corporate roboting type things that we used to do, I do think that there's always going to be that there, but it's a matter of kind of meeting people in the middle and helping people who feel that calling, but just don't know what the next steps are, helping them take those steps or find their place within this world, especially online, because it can be a little overwhelming and confusing of like, where do I fit into all of this when there's all these people already doing X, Y, and Z the same as, or what I think is the same as what I do.
I think marketing is the most fun thing ever, but I could tell you do too. But a lot of our clients do not. And Richard said one day, you know, oh my God, our clients are those who really hate marketing. And so when you and I talked last, you spoke about more joy and more play in marketing. Can you speak into that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just say up front, I understand why marketing is terrifying. I think a lot of people have been traumatized by some experience either within their business or in their lives where they've dealt with really sketchy marketing, or they've dealt with sales people who have just like annoyed them, bothered, you know, like really pushed them or forced them, or they've been in these situations that, like, honestly, like I said, I'm not over exaggerating, we're traumatizing. And so when they think about marketing for their own business, they think about that really, you know, oh, in order to be successful, you have to be that pushy salesperson, or in order to be successful, you have to, you know, adopt all of these sketchy marketing practices. And so one of the big things that I do, one of my big underlying messages is that it doesn't have to be that way. You can still be successful without necessarily doing all of that. And I think in order for us to overcome or to get past some of that trauma we may or may have experienced at some point, is to find ways to make marketing more fun and more playful. I think a lot of people, especially the ones that I've worked with relatively recently, you know, they think of marketing, when you think of marketing as like it's something you have to check off the box, like check a box off of, it's not very fun. So I really, you know, just encourage, you know, they think that in order to be taken seriously, they have to be serious. And I think especially in a lot of these, you know, like in this spiritual like modalities and things like that, or the spiritual world that we're in, I think you don't have to be serious. And I think, in fact, you know, a lot of people are looking for some, you know, a way to, you know, bring some levity to their day, to their week, to their month, to their personal life, to their business. And so I always encourage, like, whenever I see like just clients trying to get too serious or trying to be too serious about things, I do, you know, it's like finding ways to make it fun and more joyful. Is it, I have one client who on Instagram, she just, as a total side passion, just loves to draw. And so, you know, and that's what brings her joy. So I was like, just, you know, do that on your Instagram, like draw something. And she like posts that on her Instagram, and that she gets a lot of engagement on that. And it has nothing to do with what her actual like, I mean, it's related to her business, but drawing's definitely not part of her business, but that's what brings her more joy. It's more playful. And that's what really gets the creativity flowing, because if you always take things so seriously, to me, that's a recipe for stagnating creativity. So, you know, it's like, is it just talking about things? Is it drawing? Is it coloring? Is it, you know, what are ways that you can kind of just try something new or get into that place of joy and like joy and play, because ultimately that's where the best creativity comes from. And, you know, maybe like using that example of one of my clients of drawing, like maybe that's not going to be the thing that grows your business, but at the same time, it's the thing that starts like opening that door to creativity that other things kind of spill out of over time as well.
Yeah, I love that. And also I think that, you know, if you can get people to kind of be like laughter is another function. I think that when you start to go down that way, if you can get people laughing, it's a really powerful emotion, you know, as part of a marketing, you know, what you can do online. So I think laughter is a little bit harder. I think expressing joy is probably easier, like joy and creativity. Well, this has been a really wonderful call. I feel like we are kindred spirits in the marketing world.
I definitely agree. That's why I'm so excited to be here. I've been counting down the days.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Bree, can you maybe just share if people want to reach out and maybe they want get their human design done or want to hire you as a marketing consultant? How do they find out more about you?
Yeah, the best place to go to find out a little bit more about me and everything is to go to breekuryk.com/hello. So I'll spell that for you, BREEKURYK.com/hello. And that'll just kind of give you an overview of just, you know, you can find my podcast there, you can find my blog there, my YouTube channel, as well as some of the offers that I have. So that's the best place. Yeah.
All right, that's wonderful. So if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you are, you can also go to consciousmarketer.com/podcast, and we'll have the show notes. We'll have the links over to Bree's site. And we want to just thank you all for listening to our podcast. We really appreciate it. Our community continues to grow, and let's make marketing fun again. Let's bring more joy and life to it. So thank you so much for being on our podcast.
Yes, thank you.